Masha Gessen, The Man Without a Face, The Unlikely Rise of Vladimir Putin. Dive into the gritty and enigmatic world of Vladimir Putin, as presented in Masha Gessen's The Man Without a Face, The Unlikely Rise of Vladimir Putin. From his grim childhood in Leningrad to his steady rise through the KGB ranks, this book summary presents a comprehensive look at Putin's life. Discover the inner workings of a man who became the defining face of modern Russia, and how his ruthless pursuit of power led to the dismantling of democracy, suppression of dissent, and fostering of corruption on an unprecedented scale. Explore the political landscape of post-Soviet Russia and how Putin molded it to maintain his grip on power and cement his place in history.
Putin's life in a broken home. Vladimir Putin's life began in a bombed-out shell of a city in Leningrad following World War II. Living in only a small 20-square-meter room until he was 25, Putin channeled his aggression through his martial arts. His father also had ties with the Soviet intelligence agency, the NKVD, which inspired Putin's interest in spy work. Despite not being an exemplary student, Putin applied to Leningrad University and was accepted. Putin's early career in the KGB. After graduating from Leningrad University, Putin fulfilled his dream of working for the Secret Service. However, his KGB work mostly involved collecting newspaper clippings and writing reports. Putin's most significant professional accomplishment was purchasing a U.S. Army manual. Despite the communist resistance across Eastern Europe, Putin remained loyal to the KGB and the Soviet Union. When riots and protests signaled the beginning of the collapse of the communist edifice, Putin claims to have talked to protesters himself. However, when protesters approached the Dresden offices where Putin worked, he burned sensitive documents and requested help. Putin returned to his parents' house in Leningrad, confused and angry at the events following the fall and East Germany's interference with Soviet businesses. Putin's shifting allegiances. Putin navigates politics during the fall of the Soviet Union and the attempted coup against Mikhail Gorbachev. Returning to Russia, Putin found himself in a country rapidly transforming under Gorbachev's reform program, including glasnost or openness. Pro-democracy politicians were elected to parliament in 1989, including law professor Anatoly Sobchak, whom Putin served as an advisor while still a member of the KGB. Despite Gorbachev's Committee for Constitutional Oversight, the KGB continued to spy on pro-democratic politicians. In August 1991, the KGB and a group of politicians launched a coup against Gorbachev, placing him under house arrest. Putin distanced himself from the KGB to protect himself and played both sides of the coup with Sobchak's apparent approval. Putin and Sobchak hid in a bunker during the coup and emerged only when it was safe 2 days later. The coup failed, and Putin continued to navigate the shifting political landscape, eventually rising to power as the president of Russia. Putin and Sobchak, the rise and fall of two opportunistic leaders. In the chaos following the collapse of the Soviet Union, Putin and Sobchak took advantage by using their positions to enrich themselves. Putin negotiated an ill-fated trade deal that benefited him with a $34 million kickback, while Sobchak exploited his power to provide his friends and family with cushy apartments. Putin's fortunes changed when he became head of the FSB and managed to clear Sobchak's corruption charges. Political rivalry ensued, with Putin eventually becoming president, and Sobchak dying under mysterious circumstances after an apparent reconciliation with Putin. Putin's rise to power. After the fall of communism in Russia, President Yeltsin's administration struggled with a grim economic situation and increasing inequality. To protect himself from his political enemies, Yeltsin turned to his political clique, the family, to choose his successor. They selected Vladimir Putin, who was believed to be compliant and safe. Putin became prime minister and the head of a new political party with the help of oligarch Boris Berezovsky, who financed his interests in multiple industries. In 2000, Yeltsin resigned and appointed Putin, who had no political experience, as acting president of Russia. Putin's rise to power transformed Russia's politics, constitution, and people. The rise of Putin through terror and war. In 1999, a series of terrorist bombings hit Russia, attributing the blame to native Chechens. However, evidence suggests that the Russian Secret Service may have been responsible for the attacks to incite fear and war. The crisis continued, with hostage crises in 2002 and 2004, during which Russian forces used illegal methods and caused significant casualties. After the Beslan siege, Putin consolidated his power by appointing governors, lower house of parliament, and mayors while restricting reviews to a chamber of deputies he had appointed. Putin's reign of terror. Putin's rise to power in Russia led to a climate of fear where dissent was met with severe consequences. Entrepreneurs who didn't support him were stripped of their fortunes, exiled, or even killed. Vladimir Guzinsky, a media mogul who questioned Putin, was forced into exile after armed men invaded his company. Other critics like Boris Berezovsky faced fraud charges, had their assets seized, or were killed. Even tentative revelations by individuals like Alexander Litvinenko and journalist Anna Politkovskaya about the involvement of the FSB in the Moscow theater siege and other atrocities went nowhere. Putin's reign of terror continues to hold Russia in its grip. Putin's rise to wealth and power. Putin's wealth and ascent to power were obtained through corruption, shady business deals, and stealing. Those who question him risk losing everything, as the story of Mikhail Khodorkovsky shows. When Putin first took office, he was deemed as incorruptible, but that perception quickly changed. Today Putin is believed to possess an unprecedented amount of wealth, valued at around $40 billion. He obtained this wealth through illegitimate means and has even been witnessed stealing publicly. To a smaller extent, Putin's wealth can be traced to the cuts he received from oligarchs' donations intended for medical equipment. However, those who seek to expose Putin do so at their own risk, as the story of Mikhail Khodorkovsky demonstrates. Khodorkovsky built his wealth through government loans and the acquisition of Yukos, a large Russian oil company. While he was a philanthropist and spoke publicly and directly to Putin about corruption destroying Russia, he was arrested and imprisoned on tax evasion and fraud charges after challenging the president of state oil company Rosneft. Ultimately, Khodorkovsky lost everything as his company was auctioned to a Putin ally. Putin's wealth and rise to power are founded on corruption and an iron grip on his people, making those who question him vulnerable to his wrath. Putin's rise to power. Putin rose to power in 2000, after a purported democratic phase in Russia, and quickly placed restraints on the media and altered parliament's upper house. During his presidential term limits in 2008, Putin selected Dmitry Medvedev as president, but he remained influential as prime minister. Putin actively suppressed economic and political reformers, even threatening anyone who challenged his political rule. He cleverly created dummy political parties to pivot left and right and excluded rival candidates. Putin's party won 49% of the vote in the 2011 parliamentary elections, despite major infringements. Putin prohibited foreign funding for non-governmental organizations in 2012, and the band Pussy Riot received a 2-year prison sentence for playing an anti-Putin song in a cathedral. Transparency International reported rampant corruption within Russia. Putin's image versus reality. Putin's carefully crafted image is often at odds with reality, as evidenced by examples ranging from his staged wildlife encounters to his lack of empathy in response to tragedy. Russian President Vladimir Putin is known for carefully cultivating a tough guy image, regularly appearing in staged photos and videos showcasing his exploits, such as riding horseback or subduing wild animals. However, it is increasingly evident that much of what he presents to the public is carefully choreographed and not representative of reality. For example, many of his wild animal encounters have been criticized as being staged using captive animals, and his discovery of ancient Greek jars during a dive was revealed to have been a planned stunt. Beyond his carefully crafted public persona, Putin has also been criticized for a lack of empathy and poor communication skills. In 2000, a Russian nuclear submarine experienced an explosion that left 118 men stranded. While Norway and Britain offered to assist in the rescue effort, Russia initially refused, citing security concerns. Putin himself was slow to respond to the crisis, preferring to stay at his Black Sea holiday home and only visiting the town where the submarine had been stationed much later. When he did finally speak publicly about the tragedy, he seemed more concerned about the loss of equipment than the lives of the officers. Putin's carefully crafted image is often at odds with reality, and his poor response to tragedy highlights the dangers of prioritizing public perception over true leadership.
Masha Gessen's The Man Without a Face, The Unlikely Rise of Vladimir Putin, paints a shocking and revelatory picture of the man who has become synonymous with modern Russia. The book's summary delves into Putin's extraordinary rise to power, outlining the forces and events that shaped his character and fortified his resolve. From the dysfunctional socioeconomic environment of post-World War II Leningrad to his days in the KGB, Gessen charts a course that ultimately led to Putin's reign of fear, repression, and corruption. Understanding the man behind the carefully constructed political persona is crucial in comprehending the forces that drive contemporary Russia and its relationship with the world.